anything controls the human race, it's money. So I felt compelled to cover this subject. Now, I just want you to imagine that suddenly the world has ended and all that's left is this room of people. And I want you to imagine that everyone takes off their jewellery to sell it. And I give every person in this room £10. So that's all that's left. You've all got £10 and you've all got some jewellery to sell. What would happen? Well, each item of jewellery would establish a price and a value. And that value would be largely determined by the 70 people in this room. The total amount of money in the room would determine the value of each item of jewellery. Now, if I then added another £70, so I give you all another £10, would you all be twice as well off? You wouldn't, because there's the same amount of wealth in the room. There's still the same amount of jewellery in the room. We're not any wealthier. We've got twice as much money. It just means that each pound is worth half of what it was. So if you double the amount of money in an economy, you halve the value of every pound. And that's what inflation is called. So if you double the amount of money in the British economy tomorrow, prices would all double immediately because of inflation, and your pound in your pocket will be worth half of what it is. So the amount of wealth in an economy is determined by the amount of stuff and not by the money itself. So that's a key point to get across. Because if I was to, that second £700, or that second lot of money that I was to add to the economy, if I could give it to half of you, not the others, the people who had the £10, they've still got £10, but that £10 is worth half of what it was. So you've kind of taken wealth from them by adding money to the other half of the economy. So the key points I'm trying to make is that what determines the value of each pound is the total amount of money in circulation and the total amount of goods in circulation. Inflation is caused by adding currency to an economy. And obviously adding currency to an economy devalues the money in the economy. And the other thing to point out is that our money today, we call it fiat currency because the paper actually has no value. It's not like it was in the past when we had gold. It's the goods and services that have the value, not the money. And banks don't create any wealth when they print money. The wealth comes from the workers of the country. Banks never create wealth by printing money. Okay, now it's a very important principle that by adding money into the economy devalues the value of the pound in your pocket. And bear that in mind throughout this presentation. Now, I'm just going to go through the history of why money was created and what its function was originally. Now, a long time ago, they had the barter system. So let's say I was a chicken farmer. I would go into the market, I've got my chickens, and I wanted some potatoes. So I'll give you 2 chickens for a bag of potatoes. And that's how it worked. People would swap goods. So they bartered for things. But that was a bit inconvenient because if I want potatoes, but the guy who's got potatoes doesn't want chickens, then you're in a bit of a problem. It means you've got to swap them for something else, and then it gets complicated. So something which was of intermediary value was introduced, and that was money. Now, it started off with precious metals and coins. And money, the sole purpose of money when it was first originated was to facilitate the exchange of goods and services, period. That's what money is for. It's so that you can easily get rid of what you've made and then obtain something what someone else has made. And I would argue that if money is used for anything other than that, that's when you get problems. And as I said, precious metals became the obvious choice for money because it had high value and it was small, could be easily carried around. And obviously gold is more rare than, say, copper, so a gold coin will be worth more than a copper coin. And the money itself had value because it was a precious, rare metal. Now, where paper money started out, it started out as promissory notes. So imagine I'm the chicken farmer and I go to the market. I've left me chickens at the farm. And the guy says, oh, I'll have 10 chickens off you. Well, why don't I just write on a piece of paper, I promise to pay the bearer of this piece of paper 10 chickens if you come to the farm, rather than me cart them to you in a truck. So I give them that piece of paper. So that's what a promissory note is. Now, the guy might think, oh, I don't need these chickens. So he then sells that promissory note to someone else. Then he sells it to someone else. So the chickens have changed hands 5 times, but the chickens have never left the farm. Okay? Now that's fine, that system works. But you can see the flaw, the temptation, is the chicken farmer writes a few too many promissory notes. And what's going to happen then? Let's say he's got 100 chickens and he writes 200 chickens worth of promissory notes. And they all come to collect their chickens at the same time. He's going to be in deep shit. So you would then have to devalue the chicken promissory note. So he would be very unpopular then. So this is the flaw in a promissory note system, but in principle there's nothing wrong with it. Now in the 1600s, the promissory note system and the coin system, they came together with the advent of goldsmiths. Now goldsmiths, what they did was they worked with gold, they cast gold. Because they worked with these precious metals, they had the best safes in the world to keep that money in. Here's an example of one here, 16th century safe. So people who had a lot of gold and a lot of precious coins, they would say to the goldsmiths, can you keep my money in your safe because it'll be better for me, you know, I don't want to get burgled. Now, so the goldsmiths started getting more and more people's money, not their money, other people's money. And then one day, one goldsmith said, oh, well, I can lend out this money. It's not my money, but that doesn't matter. So they started lending out the gold to other people. Okay? So what have you done when you do that? If you lend one gold coin out, you've effectively added money into the economy, which devalues everyone else's money. But not only that, these goldsmiths, they started lending out the gold more than once. How did they do that? They gave promissory notes. So when someone came to borrow some gold, they would say, well, will you just take this promissory note? And then they would write another promissory note to someone else for the same piece of gold. So they're increasing the amount of money in the economy through promissory notes. And typically, they would lend out 4 to 5 times more than what they had in the safe. As long as the goldsmiths didn't get too greedy and everyone didn't come at once to collect their gold, it would work. Now, but the goldsmith was also charging interest. So he's taken someone's gold, he's loaned it out 4 or 5 times, and he's getting interest on that. Now, does that sound fair to you? Does that sound fair to anyone in this room? And this is why the goldsmiths became the richest people in the world. And guess who became the kings of the banking? The people who started this system. The goldsmiths became the bankers. And guess what? When that system first started, the first goldsmith who started lending out other people's money, it should have been ended there and then because the system is flawed. The reason why the system is flawed is because the goldsmiths become the richest people in the economy because they're getting all this interest, yet they're the only ones not doing any work. And they're the richest people. The other reason why it's flawed is because it adds discriminatory amounts of additional currency into the economy, which devalues everyone's pound in everyone's pocket. So in my view, they have a word for this. This is what the official system is now that we have. It's called the fractional reserve system, and this is how they create money now. They should have scrapped it in the 1600s. So the only difference now is that it's not actual real gold that they work with. The Bank of England, the central bank, which has the authority to create new currency, it presses a button on a computer, creates a whole load of new money. That is then deposited with the commercial banks, banks that we can go in and use. The commercial banks then lend out a very high percentage of that money, typically 9%. Eventually that money comes back into most people who get money, they redeposit it with a bank, and then they lend out 90% of that. So typically for every pound the central bank deposits, you get 10 times the amount into the economy. So it reduces the value of everyone's money. But what's the net effect? The net effect is that the banking system as a whole becomes the richest part of the economy because it's getting interest on all of those multiplied loans. This is the system we have today. Now, in order to try and, put the reins on this system, they brought in what's called the gold standard, where every promissory note in the economy was supposed to be backed by gold. So if you had a pound note in your pocket, you could go and get that piece of gold, and there would be a piece of gold equivalent to all the amount of money in the economy. But I don't think there's any economists would say that all of the gold ever covered the paper money that was in the economy. It never really worked. And this is where the expression "as good as gold" comes from. The note in your hand is as good as the gold that's in the bank. And as I said, this became the official system, this fractional reserve, as it's called. That's how new money is created. And it was made official in 1694 when they created the Bank of England, which is a very curious thing. And it's something which we very rarely see challenged on our mainstream television, whether we need the Bank of England. And more poignant, who owns the Bank of England?